So imagine this. You've just won a massive election. But what if you're being warned that the real threat isn't the opponent you just beat, but the very people you're picking to be on your team? Well, that is the core argument we're going to explore today, based on a series of articles claiming a new administration is being sabotaged from the inside out.
The author of these pieces kicks things off with this classic Ian Fleming quote, and honestly, it really sets the tone for their entire perspective. They're not looking at these controversial appointments as isolated mistakes or simple bad luck. They're asking, is this a pattern, a deliberate one? Is this, as Fleming put it, enemy action?
All right, so what we're going to do here is unpack the argument from these source articles. We're going to walk through the author's case step by step so we can all understand exactly why they believe this major political victory could be getting undermined from within.
Okay, here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at the core problem, why the author thinks the victory is in peril. Then we'll zero in on the person they call the gatekeeper. After that, we'll map out the powerful networks they claim are involved, take a hard look at the specific names on their list of controversial picks, and we'll finish with the author's pretty stark final warning.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, a victory in peril. This is where the author really lays out the heart of their concern.
So right from the get-go, the author points to what they see as a huge contradiction. A candidate runs on a very specific platform, gets a massive mandate for change from the voters, and then they start appointing people who seem to represent the very system they promised to dismantle. The author uses the word appalled for a reason. In their view, this isn't just bad politics, it's a betrayal of the voters' trust, right from day one.
And this leads us directly to the person the author identifies as the main source of the problem, the new chief of staff, who they've labeled the gatekeeper.
And that gatekeeper is Susie Wiles, the incoming chief of staff. Now just take a look at this diagram on your screen. It comes directly from the source material. It's meant to show her alleged web of influence. You can see her right there in the center, connected through her lobbying firm Mercury to a whole host of powerful players. The author argues this makes her the key link between the new administration and the very establishment it ran against.
The articles then dig even deeper into these connections. They point out that Wiles' firm, Mercury, is owned by Omnicom, which is a major partner of the World Economic Forum. And then you look at their client list. We're talking about the pharmaceutical giant Pfizer, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, a lot of big names. The author presents this as a pretty clear conflict of interest. They also flag her past lobbying work. But the key takeaway here, according to the author, is that these corporate ties aren't just words on paper. They've allegedly shaped real-world decisions on everything from vaccine policy to who gets endorsed for political office.
So the author argues it's not just about one person. They broaden their focus to what they call the influential networks, the organizations that are allegedly pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
And at the very top of the author's list is the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025. They describe it as, essentially, a government in a box, a massive playbook and personnel database created to let a new administration just hit the ground running. Now, the irony that the author points out is that the president-elect publicly dismissed this project, and yet, now many of its key architects are being tapped for senior roles in the government.
This slide does a fantastic job of showing the two completely different views of an organization like the Atlantic Council. On the left, you've got its official mission, nonpartisan, all about U.S. leadership. But then on the right, you have the author's take. They see it as a hub for entrenched globalism, deeply tied to the CIA and committed to a foreign policy agenda that prioritizes NATO and hostility towards Russia. Understanding this stark contrast is absolutely key to grasping the author's criticism of any appointee who's linked to this organization.
This brings us right to the evidentiary heart of the argument, a roster under scrutiny, where we're going to look at the author's specific critiques of some of these key nominees.
First on the list is Dr. Mehmet Oz, tapped to lead Medicare and Medicaid. The author's critique kicks off with this photo from 2018, showing Dr. Oz with Turkish President Erdogan. For the author, this isn't just a picture, it's Exhibit A in their case questioning his loyalties.
And to really underscore this concern, the author brings in former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who is quoted as calling Dr. Oz a threat to national security because of his work for state entities in Turkey. For the author, a warning that direct from a former top official is a massive red flag.
But the author's critique doesn't stop at national security. They put together a whole list of what they see as ideological disqualifiers. First, his dual citizenship and his vote in a Turkish election. Then, they point to a series of policy positions they claim are totally out of step with the new administration's platform, from his past support for red flag gun laws and Obamacare to his stated views on abortion rights and teaching concepts like critical race theory in schools.
Next up, Marco Rubio, the nominee for Secretary of State. The author uses this diagram to make a very specific point. In their view, the State Department, the Pentagon, and the CIA don't operate in separate little boxes. They're all part of one big, interconnected national security apparatus. And the author's argument is that Rubio is a product of this exact system, and that's where his loyalties really lie.
The author builds this case against Rubio by pointing to his connections. They highlight his role at the International Republican Institute, which they flat out call the CIA wing of the GOP, and his ties to the Council on Foreign Relations. They also bring up his key role on the Gang of Eight, that bipartisan group of senators that pushed for a major immigration reform bill back in 2013. For the author, all of this adds up to one conclusion, that Rubio represents the very establishment this administration promised it would dismantle.
And the list goes on. This slide is a quick summary of other key figures the author scrutinizes. They criticize Pam Bondi for her lobbying history, Pete Hegseth for his ties to Koch-funded groups, Dr. Janet Neshawat for her support of vaccines and her sister's links to the Atlantic Council and the World Economic Forum, and finally they target Tulsi Gabbard for her past positions on the Green New Deal and the Iran nuclear deal. It's a rapid-fire list of what the author considers to be major red flags.
All of this leads to the author's fifth and final section, the final warning, where they try to connect all these different dots.
So how does the author tie all of this together? Well, they argue that these appointments are not random. They claim to see a common thread connecting them, a thread woven from the influence of Big Pharma, the World Economic Forum, and the intelligence community. In their view, this isn't a series of individual mistakes, but a coordinated effort.
And this quote, which is attributed to former ICE Director Tom Homan, just perfectly captures the author's ultimate fear. The argument isn't that the president-elect himself is compromised, it's that he's being surrounded and insulated by advisors who are, and that they're effectively allowing external agendas to just seep right into the administration.
And so the author leaves the reader with this one final, pretty haunting question. After presenting all this evidence, the gatekeeper, the networks, the specific appointees, they just ask a simple question. Who is actually vetting these people? It's a powerful ending, designed to make you wonder if the very guards at the gate are the ones who are opening it for the enemy.